to be let in. But I'll go ahead and get things started tonight. My name is Natalie Fritz, and I am the Archivist and Outreach Director for the Clark County Historical Society. And this is one of our virtual programs where we get to, you guys can give suggestions, and we share things that we have in our collections and from the archives, and stories from local history. And today's is about crafting fashions. We realized that we had a lot of stuff about local people that made clothing, made hats, made shoes, different things like that. So we've got a lot of stuff in our collection, which would be probably a whole other program, and would probably be better in person. So that might be something that Miranda, our on our collection staff, who deals with most of our clothing, she would be good for a program like that, to be able to actually pull out a lot of this stuff and talk more about the styles, the time periods, the things like that. That's not what I'm going to try to do tonight. I'm going to talk more about the stories behind some of the people that made this stuff and some of the things that we have in our collection, as much as we can. Some of it will take a bit more research and to be able to find more information about it. A lot of all the things that we have in our collection, we were just talking about with a class that we talked to recently. It's kind of a detective hunt every time we get a new item or looking at a new item. And Patty, I know you know that from working down in the collections, that everything that we have, you got to go find out the story behind it, who donated it, who used it, how was it used, how was it made, all that kind of information, because we've learned that not all of that information comes with the donation. We have to do a lot of digging on our own to find out more information about this stuff. So I forgot to put this slide in about this, but as with all of our virtual presentations, this one is recorded, and it will be available later on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page. So people can go back and watch it and learn information about stuff that we have. These are always kind of laid back. So if you know something about something up there, or if you want to add anything, you can unmute yourself to say whatever you'd like to say, or you can put stuff in the chat. I'll be paying attention to that. So I've kind of organized stuff by type of item made. So we'll just get right into it and start with hats, which is what we, I think, have the most about, or that I could find as far as stuff that we could put together. So does anyone know what you call a someone who makes women's hats? It's a milliner. How about men's hats? It's a haberdasher. And I looked up the words. Haberdashery actually applies to not just a place that sells hats, but it's anything to, or in a millinery is where women's stuff is. It's not just hats. It's basically any accessories and things like that that you would get. So like, I think that applies to like ties and cufflinks and women's gloves and things like that are all under millinery. But a milliner is someone who makes hats. So we see in some of the ads that, you know, they advertise that it's a haberdashery, which, you know, so men would know that they could go there and get all sorts of accessories that they might need. So I wanted to start out with this one that shows the location of a former hatter, Buckeye Hatters, which was located on East Main Street. And I had sent this to the paper as a then and now, so that they can go get the now picture. The picture on the left actually comes from a really great collection that we have of scrapbook that we think is from about the 1920s. All of the pictures are by Harrison and Weber. Howard Weber was the father of Howdy Weber, who was a later photographer for the Springfield newspaper that a lot of people knew. But Howard Weber and Harrison, they did a lot of commercial photography in the 20s. And somebody found this album of photographs in a house in Springfield and donated it to us. And it has all of these wonderful storefront photos. So it's made for really great options for the then and now pictures for the paper, because the scrapbook pages include a photo, usually includes the letterhead for the company and like business cards. So it gives us their address and the owners and information like that, which is a great start for a caption if you're trying to figure out, you know, to write about a picture there. So Buckeye Hatters was at 109 East Main Street, which is now where Key Bank is. He started out there in 1907, and 1915 he moved to South Fountain. This photo is from later, actually. So this photo is from Fountain Avenue, but even though he'd started out on Main, and they called it Buckeye Hatters at that time, and it was managed by a man named Richard Weber. And in the advertisement said they were sellers of hats, cats, cats, and gloves at popular prices. It remained there until the 1940s and then moved to South Limestone and then West High, and closed in the 1950s. So there might still be people around that remember Buckeye Hatters existing. This is just a really great photo that we don't know anything about. We don't know where these women with wonderful hats and purses were. And we're not sure exactly the time period, but we've gone by clothing styles that we think it's about the mid-1940s. But everyone in the picture has a great hat, and no exception. I think it looks like, yeah. Well, no, there's a woman in the back, towards the back. It doesn't appear to have a hat on unless it's colored like her hair. Maybe the woman behind her, but everybody has hats. Looks like all the people in the front at least are holding purses. We can see the wallpaper on the back has like zodiac symbols of scorpions and lions. And so we're not sure if that's a local place that had that, but we know that the photo belonged to Lois Brown, who worked for Hugo Bosco Leather Company, which is another thing that we'll talk about later about leather making. She worked there for a number of years and went to Northminster Presbyterian and was a member of the Forest Hills Garden Club and helped chair the flower show out at the fair and at the Upper Valley Mall. We're not sure which one she is in this photo. She wasn't identified in it, but we wish we knew exactly when and where this happened. This might be something we could find a little bit more information about from the paper. If we searched her name, maybe they identified all of the women in the picture if it was in the paper, but with such a large group of women, I would doubt that they identified all of them if this one did run in the paper. But it's a great picture. Another great hat one that I wanted to share is from the newspaper. These are women in New Carlisle who made hats out of vegetables and flowers from their garden. And there was a spread of them showing all their different hats. This one here, she used fruits and flowers in her hat on the right here. So they got to show them off. It was part of the, they called them the Blossoming Hedda Hoppers. And the woman on the left here won for best hat design. I thought this was a fun one. You guys know what these are? These are Fair Handy brand hat fasteners. These are in our collection. So these could have been used to pin the hats, pin the hat to your head. We looked up the company here. It was out of Michigan that made the Fair Handy fasteners. And here, this is a selection of some of the great hats that we have in our collection. We like to just share this on like Derby Day to see what Derby hats people are wearing. We shared this for Coronation Day because everybody had great fancy hats. But this is all from one collection. It was the Martineau Peck collection. I think that these, I don't know if Casey knows, I forgot to look up who the exact donor was, but I think they're connected to Mary Martineau, who was a longtime volunteer here who used to work at the front desk. I think these may have belonged to somebody in her family. But there's lots of very colorful different styles here. Miranda could tell you a lot more about the different eras that we have represented here. And I know Miranda herself has made hats as part of a class that she took. So that's a story for another time to learn a little bit more about them specifically. This is another hat tool. Do you guys know what this is? It's actually two.
It's a hat mold and stretcher.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the stretcher here is adjustable, so you could, you know, stretch out the brim if needed, and stretch your hat over it. So this is one of the tools we have in the collections. And then we have quite a few men's hats as well. This is a beaver top hat. And this is one of the pictures from when we were getting ready for the museum and making the exhibition catalog. They photographed all of the artifacts. So the hat was out then. And this is another one. And again, to do more, so going from this picture, we have a bunch of pictures, but they're not necessarily tied with a number. We would then look up the number here, and it would tell us who the donor is. We know that from the number that it came to us in 1989, but we could learn more about who wore it, or where it came from. So that's what we can do with any artifact that we have. We can do based on the number written on the artifact. We can go back and find that information, which I did not do before. I just pulled this hat up, found this hat this afternoon up on our computer system, but didn't go down to the paper records to see when this one came in. This was a woman that I learned a little bit more about this past week working on this. We have this great picture of her in our identified women collection, and the notes and past perfect, our computer system said that she was a milliner. So we looked her up and saw that she was at 23 South Market in the 1870s, which is now South Fountain. So she was around our block, but this was before even our building was built. So she would have been the previous building to here. Her husband ran a livery and omnibus line. So like that was a horse-drawn carriage line that you could rent on North Limestone. And they had 4 children, including a son whose name was Lake Erie, Deffenbach, which I thought was a really great name, and I wish we knew why they named him Lake Erie. But we know that he went by Lake E, and he worked at Mass Kroll and Kirkpatrick, which was the forerunner to Kroll Collier. And we know that she's listed in the directory running the millinery for at least 10 years. So, and it's as you can imagine, our identified men collection, our identified women collection is much smaller than our identified men photo collection. We don't always have the stories behind it. So it's good that we had, there was notes with this picture that we could look up a little bit more about her. It looks like a mourning photo, but she actually died before her husband. So I would have thought that this was a mourning photo. So it might still be, but we don't know exact details or her age of the photo. These are some boxes that came recently with a donation. You'll see the hats on the next slide, but they came to us in the original boxes where they had gotten the hats from. So they had shopped at Wren's here in Springfield, but also Reich's in Dayton, because before Reich's was out at the mall in the 1970s, the only location was in Dayton. So we know that those were earlier hats, so they would have come from the Dayton location. We do have quite a few hat boxes in our collection. Patty, I don't know if you've if that's in the room that you've worked in. But
yeah, they're those and a lot of clothing boxes too.
So yeah, a lot of stuff from Wren. So these are some of the wonderful hats that we got in this most recent collection from the Gano family. This is Chilton Gano was the husband, and I've forgotten the wife's name, but these were her hats. These were the hats worn by her bridesmaids at their wedding in, I believe, 1937. And then just a lovely selection of hats. I love this floral one up here. It's got the netting on it and flowers. And I know Miranda was really excited by all the clothing that came in with this collection too, because it was she had a lot of different older designer clothing, things like that she'd gotten locally and at stores around the world. So this is some photos of Jim the Hatter, if anybody remembers that, located at the arcade. Jim came from Greece in the, I believe, sometime in the early 1900s. He actually came twice. We have an interview with him in our oral history collection, and he talks about that. He originally came to the U.S. and was deported back to Greece after not very long, and then was able to come back and eventually made his way to Springfield by the 1930s. And he started training as a hatter and had this shop in the arcade. And we got these slides recently from Steve Sharp, who did our last program about the restoration project for the Heritage Center. He had a whole bunch of slides of downtown businesses, especially his office was right above the arcade, so he has lots of in-progress pictures of the arcade being torn down, and he had a bunch of pictures around the arcade before they started demolition, including some interior photos of Jim the Hatter's place. And interestingly, we have a new volunteer, Dick Stephanopoulos, who is Jim the Hatter's son, who has been working with us up in the archives. So
Natalie, weren't they on the corner of Main and Fisher for a while, in the corner of the First National Bank building?
I'm not sure about his other location.
I vaguely remember that being right before you cross Fisher Street, that very corner spot of the First National Bank building. I thought he had an office or had a store at.
So would that have been?
It's facing Main Street, facing south.
Would that have been early? Because we know that he moved out of the arcade in '88, right? Before they began demolition there. So would that would have been his earlier location, or did he move there later?
Gosh, I remember walking past it. I'm thinking it would have been prior to that, but I'm not sure.
Okay, well, we'll have to look it up and find out where else he was. I know that in his interview he talks about it was in '88, and he had recently received the letter saying that he was going to need to move out of the arcade. So he was in the arcade up until the end. This is another one that we did some research on recently. There was a woman who contacted us, and she had found in the census that her ancestor was listed as a milliner as her occupation in the census, and was wondering where she would have worked. And we figured it out going through the directories at that time period, that she worked at the Ideal, which was a shop downtown. There was actually two shops called the Ideal. This was not the same as a later shop that I think was Ideal Jewelry. Patty, you've probably run across some of the Ideal Jewelry boxes that we have. But the Ideal, the millinery was a separate and a short-lived business that was only listed in the directory for a few years. This is I don't think the Holseisers made it on here, but this is a great picture that is Bob Holseiser's grandmother wearing a wonderful hat that I ran across in the Women Identified, and I just wanted to share that one. But Bob and Flossie are always bringing lots of stuff from their family collections that we have in the archives and in our collections area as well. Next business we'll talk about is Furriers. They made furs in the area. Thought I'd start with this slide showing our fur trapper that we have at our Night at the Museum event that we hold in the spring. We're not holding it this year, but he starts right at the front of Night at the Museum at our map, which is drawn by fur traders. So that's what we tell people when they come to the beginning of the museum, that this was a 1700s fur traders map. And it kind of puts people in that mindset that they can look at the map and realize that it doesn't really equate to what we see today when we look at maps. It's kind of skewed, so that the people that were coming out west and settling in this area were stepping more into the unknown, the unexplored area. So we use that map to illustrate that. And he stands there during Night at the Museum and talks about fur trading, which were the first people that came through our area before there was people that settled. Besides the Native Americans that were here. So they would have been the first interactions with Native Americans, would have been fur traders coming through here. So he talks a bit about that. And this is where Key Bank is now, at the corner of Fountain and Main. This was the Martin building, and it was this was about it was purchased in 1950 by the Springfield Savings Society to build their new bank there, which in 1961. So this was the building there before the Key Bank building. But this corner was known as Trappers Corners because that's where the early trappers went to trade furs and skins. So this is the building prior to the 1961 building. And this is, I think we have a few furs in our collection, but this is one with one of the ones from Bancroft's, a furrier that was around since 1851 in Springfield. This is a beautiful, big, heavy one that came in a few years ago. And this is, you can see down here on the right, says Hats and Furs Bancroft. This is actually one of the oldest pictures we have. It's really great of downtown Springfield. This is looking west down Main Street. So none of these buildings are here anymore. This side would be the fountains of the around the plaza. This is the First National Bank building or whole plaza. And then this would be those other buildings that are on the corner those are very old buildings on the corner, but this is an even older picture before those buildings were built. So this is from the 1870s. This is the 1848 First Presbyterian Church that used to stand back behind. That's about where the Madonna of the Trail statue is now. And this is the Black's Opera House, which opened in 1869 and it burned down in 1903 in February. That was one of our big turn of the century fires. And Bancroft's was located over here on the other corner. That was around for about 105 years. Started in the 1850s. Lewis Bancroft was what we have found an article from him in the 1880s saying that he was the oldest man who had lived continuously in the city. Was what the article said. He was a War of 1812 veteran, came to Springfield in 1816 from Massachusetts and watched the city grow up around him. His son, Frotis, went by P.E. Bancroft, trained under him as a furrier and opened his shop in 1851. And then it stayed in the family till 1955. And it was last in the RQ building, was their last location. This is a great exterior photo here. I can't remember if those men are identified in that picture. I didn't look this one up today, but this is the outside picture. But this is one that we have down in the museum. This is inside. It looks very wild. This is them at Fountain and Main. And I love the, all the furs. They've got a leopard or cheetah over here, and all the furs spread out all over the place. And it looks a bit chaotic, but it's a really cool picture. This is one that we have down in the museum where we have lift the flap and you can see what stores look like on the outside and the inside. And I don't think you would have expected, to see something like this. Next, we'll talk about shoes. So I've meant to look this up. I know cobbler is the term for someone who makes shoes, but is there another term that I'm not sure? I meant to look see if there was multiple terms for that. But this is a cobbler's bench that we have in the collection where they would have used the cubbies to hold different tools and the surface here to work on. And then this is a miniature little cobbler's bench that we have in our, I don't think the model's not out now, but we have a Alaskan frontier cabin model that we used to have out in the museum that had been donated. I think it's been moved elsewhere, but when we were taking it apart, it had all sorts of furniture and things in it, including a little tiny cobbler's bench. This is one of the early shoe repair stores, and you could buy shoes and get your shoes repaired there. This was on West Main in the block that eventually became Memorial Hall. So this is the building that was there before Memorial Hall was there. So this stood at the corner of West Main and Lowry. So this picture is in 1915. Well, sometime before 1915, because we know that Memorial Hall opened in 1915. But it was there was also a sporting goods place there, Henry Deals, and then Sterling Shoe Repair was what was there. So this picture was probably not long before they took it down to build Memorial Hall, and then Memorial Hall was there until 2010. And now it's the open space in front of Wendy's. It's that area. Does anyone remember the shoe? This was over on College Avenue, and it was Chris Shoe Repair. We don't have a lot of great photos of it. The one up there, I think, is the only one that's from our collection that's an actual photo, and it's got something cut out of it. I'm not sure if this was used in a layout or something. And then I think this one was one I had found online because we didn't have any other images of it. And then we have, there was an article about cat's meows, and it had the shoe in it. So I clipped that out of there, which I don't believe we have the cat's meow of the shoe, which I would love to come across that someday. But this is, actually we had one more picture. So this is from one of our Harry Laburn collection, I think the one on the left. And then we sent this for a then and now to show you that corner of College Avenue where it once stood. But it was owned by Chris Patsiavos, who was a longtime cobbler, known for his skill, and he was known for his shoe-shaped repair shop. I know that Kevin Rose has done an interview with his son, Jim, specifically about what he could tell him about building that shoe-shaped business and more about that. So he's gathered a bit more information about why he did that, how he did it, and all of that. But Chris Patsiavos came to America from Greece at the age of 12 and started out shining shoes in the Fairbanks building, which is now Hall Plaza or First National Bank building, whatever you want to call it. And we interviewed Jim a couple of years ago, his son, who was a longtime pharmacist, and he talked to us about his dad had the story about when President Teddy Roosevelt came to Springfield in 1918. He got his shoes shined and in the Fairbanks building, and he got to shine Teddy Roosevelt's shoes. Patsiavos bought his first shoe repair shop in 1925 with money he had saved up shining shoes, and he learned the cobbler's trade working at different shops around him. 1952, he built and moved into the shoe. So he ran that and retired in 1994 at the age of 90 due to arthritis that wouldn't allow him to continue. But when we talked to Jim a couple of years ago now, his son, Jim was 94, right? And he's still around in his 90s. So this is a picture here that shows him at 13, about the time he came to Springfield. And this is him. This was an article about his 90th birthday. This is him in 1971, and this is his son, Jim, when we interviewed him a couple of years ago. There's some things that we have about Knisley shoes, if you guys remember that in the arcade. It was under the arched area off of, they had two entrances, I think, off of High and on Fountain. And this one here we have, it's covered up right now, but up in the second floor, the big canvas photos that we have up on the wall shows the two girls standing on the scale outside Knisley's. And this has the scale in it. So this is from our the model downstairs in the museum where you can walk through downtown Springfield. Has a little section with that shows Knisley's. And this is a postcard showing the interior of the arcade with Knisley's here. And then we've got some advertising stuff from them in the archives as well. This is a button hook. you would have used for shoes, but also I imagine if you had lots of buttons on your clothes as well, to do up all of those many buttons on your shoes there. So we have a couple of different kinds of shoes like this in our collection that have many buttons on them. And this picture here, this is it's an advertising piece for Oscar Young, and this is a early 1900s book we have called Springfield Men of Affairs that has caricatures of local businessmen drawn in their profession. So he was a shoe repair maker and seller that worked in the early 1900s. Let's know what this is. It's a shoe last that you would have molded the shoe onto to make and repair. So this is these are the different pieces for sizing that you could attach onto it. And then this is more from that scrapbook collection that we have of the 1920s commercial photos. You can see this one is stamped Howard Weber. So this was when he must have been on his own by that point. Some of them are stamped Weber and Harris, and some of them just have his name. But this is Blue Ribbon Shoe Repair and Shoe Store that was located on Main Street on West Main. And it was owned by J.W. Betts. And John Betts was born in Jackson County and came to Springfield in the 1880s. Started out as a carpenter, was a foreman for 2 different railways, and then he opened the Blue Ribbon Show Company on Main Street. This is around the time that he opened the store. He later moved to different locations on Columbia, East Main, and Laganda, and worked out of his home while also working at Spico as a watchman. And as a watchman at Wren's before he retired. So he was doing after a while, he was doing the shoe repair on the side. And John lived to be 100 at the IWF home. There we go. Oh, these are 2 more of the ones we have from that scrapbook. This is the Arch Preserver Boot Shop on Main Street, East Main. This is a great interior showing all of the boxes very neatly lined up and uniform, which is surprising to me that there's not more variety amongst them. So I guess they had one box type for all of the shoes. I guess I didn't really think about that there wasn't different like brands or styles or things like you see today. I don't know if anyone can speak to that. Of what shoe this would have been in the 20s. I imagine that must have been when how we know shoe stores to be when that came about. And then this is a great window photo showing the H&W boot shop owned by W.L. Douglas on Fountain. That's a great window photo of boots on display. Here's a couple more shoe stores that appear if you walk around down in the models downtown. We always talk about, there's lots of things we could do a great scavenger hunt down there, so we could tell people how many shoe stores can you find in there. So we know that Patsiovas had a shoe repair shop in Fairbanks and in Shoe Shine. So this one is shown here. The models represent about the 1940s to the early 1950s. There's not like one specific year that it represents, but there's Hanover Shoes is in this one, and then this one has Dohan Shoes, which was over next to Wren's on the Main Street side. And then during one of the last programs, or the pharmacy program, I talked about trade cards. We have lots and lots of trade cards in our collection for different businesses, and this is just one of the ones that we had for P. O'Toole, the old reliable boot and shoe man that was on East High Street. So a lot of the trade cards, the picture on the other side usually has nothing to do with what they're selling or what they're doing. It's usually just some flowery picture, but this happened to be one that actually shows somebody woman trying on shoes or having her shoe fitted or whatever, and we have someone working in the background. This is one where the picture on the back is just pretty, doesn't really have anything to do with the business, but this was for, I think it was called Starkey and Snowden, was the company there. And this is George Horner's old stand, clearance sale for boots and shoes. So this is 1882, actually has a date on it, which we don't always get. I think this one was just an advertisement. It doesn't have a picture on the back of that one. Leather goods was another industry in the area. If anyone remembers Brittany Leather Company, their tannery first opened in the 1830s in Springfield. Henry Brittany came here in the 1820s from Maryland and opened a general store downtown before opening his tannery and going into the leather business in 1830. And he chose his location at 218 East Main Street because it gave him access to the spring across the road. And his home was on that side as well. So the other side of the street here, this would be the south side, is where the donut place, Schuler's Bakery, is on Main Street. So this is that block there. And his son, Brittany's son, Charles, succeeded him in the business in 1869, and then H.V. Brittany took over in 1893. And by 1950, it was the oldest continuously operated leather processing firm in the country. So this is a 1960s view. So I think that we're like at an angle where you can't quite see down far enough to see where Schuler's is, but I think it's past this building here. This is a picture of the 1926 picture of employees from the Imperial Leather Company that we have in our collection. Shows them gathered outside their company building, which was on 38 South Center Street, which is about other side of our building up a little ways towards the corner, towards Main Street. It was founded in 1925 by Archibald McKinnon, and in 1935 it became the A.L. McKinnon Company and moved into the Greenwald building, which was further down on Center Street. It closed in the 1930s, and McKinnon went to sell insurance instead. And then his wife was with the Springfield Baking Company, and he joined her there, and that's where he retired from. But I think that some of the people are identified in this picture. And I think this might have to ask Bob Holsizer, who's not here. But I think that this was somehow connected to somebody in his family, was why we ended up with this picture, that there's a family member that works there that's in here. Another local leather company is Bosca Leather, which is still around. I looked them up today. They were established in 1911 by just forgot his first name, but he married Caro Bailey Bosca, and this is a advertising sheet that shows all local businesses that were here around the 1950s. And there's a Bosca's logo is right here on here. But this is a great picture that shows all the different logos of the companies that were here in Springfield at that time. And here's Carol Bailey Bosca. She was a WASP in World War II and flew after the war as well. And she just passed away in 2007 and flew all the way up until towards the end of her life. Was a very neat lady, and she and the Bosca leather is still around making stuff today. You can purchase wallets and all sorts of stuff. I know that the Holsizers again recently donated several Bosca leather wallets that they had to our collection. And then I just wanted a lot of the you could just buy this stuff directly at the suppliers for the different things. We're at different department stores downtown. And this is just a really fun picture showing employees at JCPenney for their Penny's 56th anniversary that they were having downtown. So they kind of dressed up like old time days. So you saw the women have bonnets and the men all look kind of like barbershop singers. They're all have fake mustaches, and they're in the shoe department at Penny's. But the company was founded in 1902, so let's see, 56th anniversary. This would have been 58. Founded in Wyoming, first came to Springfield in 1825 and was located on West Main before moving to East Main in the 30s. And this is the men's men's and women's shoe department here. And then the Penny's location was downtown until the Upper Valley Mall opened, and then it moved there in 1971. This is another downtown business. This was Morrow Drugs, which was where Park Bank is now. That corner and that was later Dow Drugs too, but it was Morrow before that. So this is a 1920s picture from that same scrapbook, listing all the different things that they had there, including haberdashery. And they started out in 1905 in the corner of High and Limestone, and then expanded to eventually have 13 locations by the 1920s. And then they were advertised as being open all night, every night. And they held to the Morrow Creed, which guaranteed your satisfaction or your money back. And then around the late 1920s, it became Dow Drugs, which it was for a number of years. And this was another one of the businesses. It was inside Walter Phillips. Oops. So this was a haberdashery. So you could get hats, you could get gloves, you could get ties, you could get suspenders, different things there. And it was run by Walter Phillips around the 1920s. He had been a salesman at Wren's, and then he opened up his own little area inside Morrow Drugs, selling the highest quality stock of a complete line of men's furnishings, including hats, caps, gloves, scarves, shirts, ties, collars, and underwear. And then he later moved out of there to a different location outside the store. You guys remember Wren's? This is they had all sorts of departments, and this is from that same scrapbook, and down on the letterhead it lists some of the departments, including a millinery, shoes, and different things. So this is and I know that we did another program about Wren's, where we talked to some of the people that worked on the display windows for the different departments. So they would have had them for men's clothing and shoes, and women's clothing and shoes, things like that. And then I didn't go too much into this, but another one that we have a lot of, I know Patty, you've run across a lot of jewelry boxes that we have from different jewelers in the area. We recently got a ring sizer thing that you could use to resize rings, a tool that we haven't, and I know we have lots of like costume jewelry, and we may have different jewelry in the collection as well. But these are some of the local jewelers that were represented in that 1920s scrapbook. This is Keith Jewelry, which was on North Fountain. And then the Quality Jewelry store on South Limestone. This is a great interior photo here, showing the lots of silverware and dishes as well. And then this is the A. Hube and Sons, which was on West High. And then if we wanted to do more research on any of the jewelry stores, which that's one I haven't really gone into much, is any of the jewelers. There's lots of ads and things that we have in our commercial collection, and the archives would include all sorts of stuff to tell you more about any of those business. But Hoffman Green is one that I know a lot of people remember, and that we have more information about as well. So just a taste of that, but that's something we could probably go into more on any one of these things. But that's all I have in the way of slides. Just a taste. I thought this would be a fun one I got to talk to Miranda about that, what she thinks about if we were to pull some of this stuff out, but I thought that could be a fun in-person program where we could share some of the really cool things that we have in the collection, clothing wise. We've got neat shoes and hats and all sorts of stuff that we could maybe talk about sharing during an evening program here. So, do you guys have any questions? No. Oh, someone has their hand raised. Ma'am, do you have a question?
Not raised, not hand raised, just giving you a hand clap.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. So yeah, we have a lot of fun stuff in our collections. It's really interesting. I know Patty has taken my history detectives class that we did for United Senior Services, and that's a fun one to really kind of delve into things that we have, you know, take a picture, find out more about it. And that's what we do to find a lot of this stuff. So it's always fun to put on your detective hat and try
it was fun, and you
Yeah.
learn a lot and get to try a lot of different things.
Yeah. So, Lauren, Patty, you're always detecting, finding new things. So, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And Virginia, I see Virginia's on here too. She helps file a lot of the new things that come in up in the archives when we get stuff from businesses and things like that. So, our next virtual program will be the last Wednesday of May, which is, I believe, the 29th. Yes. Wednesday, May 29th, and it's going to be about the floral industry. So we'll be talking about why Springfield's called the Rose City and different nurseries and florists and things like that. So that will be the end of May. So April showers bring May flowers. And we had thought about, when we were trying to figure out what to do for this month, we thought, well, can we talk about April showers? Is there like flooding we can talk about? And while there has been flooding here, we've been lucky to not have any really bad flooding like they had in Dayton or other places around Ohio. So we decided that there really wasn't a whole lot we could talk about. We had just a handful of pictures, but we are fortunate, and with the reservoir now to not have the flooding that other places have had. So that one wasn't really quite a good lead in. And we've done disaster program before where we got to talk about some of that. So we didn't think that there was enough for a whole program just about flooding. So yeah. If you guys have any other ideas, oh, sure.
I think it was the Nicely shoe commercial. And over would be my right side, clear at the end of that, there was a picture. I don't know, some of the rest of you probably remember Buster Brown and My Dog Tide.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the end of that thing for Nicely shoes. And there was a program on every Saturday with Buster Brown sponsoring it. And when I was 6 years old, I thought Saturday will never come around. I would get so excited about that. So did anybody else ever listen to Buster Brown on Saturdays? Am I the only one?
I don't know. I've heard, is that the same? Was there a haircut called Buster Brown haircut that women had in the 30s and 40s? That would be earlier than you, Virginia, but that's what I have to look that up now, because I swear people telling me my grandma's pictures in the 40s that she had a Buster Brown haircut. But maybe that's not right. I don't know now. I'll have to look that up. Well, thank you guys for coming tonight.
Natalie, one other thing you might research are the old restaurants that are
restaurants. That's a good one.
Rustic Inn and Curting Inn and Cedar Street, and there's a bunch of little restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good one. I will put that down. Yeah, mainly I've just been thinking about places, what I've done a lot of research on, but I don't always think of there's things I don't always think of.
Mm.
So yeah, if you guys have any ideas of things, places you remember or things like that, they could make a good program, just let me know.
Because I saw a lot of matchbooks down in my room that had all the different restaurant type names that I didn't even recognize.
And that's a big collector's item too, is the matchbooks. That's a good way to figure them out. I know we've got several boxes of restaurants, stuff upstairs in the archives, but I didn't think about matchbooks is a good way to figure out ones that we don't have any other information on. They might have had a matchbook.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for that idea. That's a good one. So, all right. Well, thanks again for coming. We'll see you guys
Bye.
next time.
Bye.